views and opinions expressed by the hosts do not state or reflect those of the company and its management. Furthermore, the assumptions, views, opinions, and insinuations made by the hosts or the guests do not reflect those of the show, the management, and the company.
Identify, discussed, understand. Casting live from Manila, Philippines, we are Simply Security, helping you streamline security easily.
Good evening, Philippines.
Good evening, listeners.
Welcome back to another episode of Simply Security recorded today, Wednesday, October 7, 2020. This is Miles Melly.
And this is Eric Kalindogan.
Welcome to Simply Security,
helping you streamline security easily.
I would like to share to you first the things that I've learned with our first episode guest, Joseph Guetta. You're very familiar with.
For those who weren't able to catch us last Wednesday, we happen to have my mentor and my boss to be our first ever guest. Of course, we have to invite him as the first guest. So basically, in that particular episode, we've talked about more in relation to security as a career.
Exactly.
On your end, Miles, what were your takeaways? Let's talk about your takeaways from last week's episode.
I have two takeaways, Eric. First, you have to have passion and genuine interest for you to pursue and thrive in a career in making security as your career. You have to have that genuine interest, or else it will be just a struggle, as this career or job requires you to be at least awake 24/7. Not really awake 24/7, but at least be aware
Like
of the things happening. Exactly. You have to be on the go. And these are the things that I realize. Skills, probably characteristics as well. If you would like to be in this career, you have to be flexible. You have to be analytical, critical at the same time, always on the go. And most importantly, you have to make sure, that
that you're
learning,
the right fit for that profession.
Exactly.
My takeaway there last week was to just introduce corporate security in a more diverse perspective, because as I've mentioned, or as we've talked about last week, sometimes when you talk about security, especially in the Philippines, the perception of security as a profession is quite limited. So I think the agenda of this project, hopefully, that we were able to introduce different kinds of career path or profession linked with security, right?
Definitely, yes. And I will consider security really as a career. It is a career, Eric. It has art and science at the same time.
Exactly.
Tonight, we have a data privacy professional working for one of the country's largest telecommunications company to share his thoughts and insights on the data privacy landscape and situation in the Philippines.
In the past, he have worked with various international corporate insurance firms in the Philippines, where he studied corporate vulnerabilities, design and manage corporate insurance models for various companies and industries. Now he sits as Globe Telecommunications Data Privacy Manager and find it as an advocacy to promote the data privacy culture in the country. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Abel Quintos.
Good evening, guys. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share my thoughts on what data privacy is all about, what is the difference between that and data protection, and why it's important, especially now that we do most of the things that we used to do physically na digital na siya ngayon. Thank you very much, guys.
Getting to know you more muna on a personal level. Have you ever imagined yourself doing what you're doing now?
To be honest, not really, because in our university days, there's no data privacy regime in the Philippines yet. So it's not really a career path that people would be discussing after college, for example. So the answer there is really no. I was not really very interested in data protection when we were in college. Generally, umusbong lang yung data privacy as a profession around 2012 until 2015 nagkaroon ng discussion, because
in the the same time that the Data Privacy Act, I think, was enacted.
Definitely, tama.
What was your first encounter on data protection or data privacy that made you so interested into it?
So I was part of international insurance brokerage company where we already practice bits and pieces ng data privacy. I had a very super basic understanding of what data privacy is all about. But then a friend of mine referred me to Globe Telecom, and they said that there's an opportunity there for a career path in data privacy. And I felt like the industry is young. It's a new path. Konti pa lang mga tao. So I said, this is an interesting opportunity because you will be one of the pioneers in terms of growing that culture in the Philippines. So other than that, data privacy is all about giving the power back to individuals as far as their data is concerned. And that is something that I really believe in.
Just going to ask lang, you've mentioned a while ago that since this particular profession is relatively young, and I'm seeing a lot of companies and organizations who are already restructuring their organizational structure way for data protection, for data privacy officers, managers, so on and so forth, or even a department. For the benefit of our audience, what does a data protection professional really does, like in a day-to-day?
Let me just clarify the difference muna between a data protection professional and a data privacy professional, because there might be some significant differences. No? If you're a data protection professional, generally you are an information security guy. So what you do is you make sure that corporate data is protected by acquiring technology, practicing some best practices, for example, para data is protected. Data is not vulnerable to being stolen, for example, will not be compromised or exposed. So companies have chief information security officers because that's what they generally do. They make sure that data is protected. A data privacy professional, on the other hand, tries to implement data privacy principles within the company. So what generally is that? As I've already said, if a company is collecting personal information like name, numbers, mobile number, addresses, these are specific information that identify an individual. So because it identifies an individual, that information should be guarded. It means that there has to be some principles insofar as handling that data is concerned. I don't know if you've experienced it. You will suddenly receive text messages from different numbers.
That's what I'm about to say.
Yes, different numbers sending you promotional materials, and you wonder how are they able to get that data or that number, and where did it come from?
Right.
So these are things that corporations now are very wary about. They have to protect all this information that they collect from customers and only allow people to access and process them if they have authority to do so. In general, I make sure that we only process information about customers when they provide us their consent or if there is a legal basis for doing that. So yun yung difference.
I specifically remember this because I remember in my younger years when fun run and marathons are still, something that I do. I specifically remember whenever we were registering, then after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we've noticed that we're getting promotional marketing emails and SMS, and quite annoying. So there's this one time we specifically called in that particular number and asked them where did they got our information. They mentioned that those informations or those data were just forwarded to them and they don't necessarily know where it's coming from. It's kind of worrying, at least for me. May habol ka ba doon, Abel?
I have to explain muna yung proseso on collection and then I will jump into what we can do about it. So in general, data processing starts when collection happens. So for example, a company has a website and then they have a promotional thing going on, for example, and they encourage people to sign up. That's the time that they're already collecting the data. So yung regime ng Data Privacy Act na batas already is triggered at the point at which the company allows for collection of data. So upon collection of data, there has to be, and always so, and this has maybe, if there is one thing that the audience would like to take away, is that if ever there is collection of data, there also needs to be a consent template. Ano ibig sabihin ng consent template? A consent template is a phrase or a notice that tells the individual the reason and purpose for collecting that data. data and to what extent that data will be processed. So the reason why it's called consent template is because that's the time where the individual gives yung consent to collect that information. Why is that important? Unauthorized collection of personal information is a crime in the Data Privacy Act. That's why all corporations should be able to collect consent properly. So in your example, may fund run, nag-collect sila ng information. If hindi sila naglagay doon ng consent requirement at hindi nila dineclare why they're taking note of that information, that is a little problematic kasi hindi transparent sa individual kung saan gagamitin yung information niya. Imagine if that information that you share would be shared to people who have insidious intentions, diba? And you write down your address there. So these people can go to your address and threaten your family. So that is one of the reasons why it has to be very clear for the individual why the data is being collected. So that's number one. So to go to your next question, is there a way to run after these people? There is. The National Privacy Commission, as a government agency, regulates tong mga ganitong klaseng violation. If you feel that your data privacy rights have been stepped upon, you can file a complaint to the National Privacy Commission. And the National Privacy Commission, as a governmental body, has the power to run after these corporations that collect your personal data and handle them improperly. So that is the first recourse. But also, if you feel na, like for example, you're a Globe subscriber and you feel na merong data privacy concern, you can directly go to our company, for example, or any other company. You can write them a letter, send them an email that you feel that your data privacy has been to an extent compromised.
But I would just like to ask Abel, because you have mentioned that this is a new path, this is a new career. What are the necessary skills needed for you to be a data protection officer of a company or of an organization?
By the way, Abel, before you answer that, just to give an insight then, most of the time now what I'm seeing, because the government is requiring to have like a data privacy officer, there's a specific skill sets that you have to do. On top of that, apparently there's also a criminal liability if you take that position.
I'll explain that. So first things first, in the Philippines, this is a very young industry. But in the European Union kasi, medyo matured na yung data privacy culture nila. So in the 1990s, they were already able to pass their own data privacy law. Tayo kasi 2012 natin napasayan, and then the IRR, we were able to come up with, I think, 2016. So that's, tayo, bata pa, pero in other countries have mature data privacy regimes. Number two, what are the skills na you need as far as becoming a professional in this field is concerned? So the first thing that you really need to have is an understanding of the industry where you belong. For example, if you belong in the retail industry, you should understand how retail processes or business cycles or business processes work. If you belong to the insurance industry, you should be able to understand how collection and processing of personal information in that industry works. You repeat that in all other types of industry. That is primary. Why? Because the determination of data privacy exposures of corporations, kung saan ka pwedeng tamaan ng data privacy breach, they all lie in how companies process or handle personal information. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of specific skills, you don't need to become a lawyer. Why? Because the National Privacy Commission and other organizations are already providing seminars that arm you as far as theoretical knowledge in data privacy is concerned. What you need to do really is to have maybe a mentor that will teach you how to execute the theories, or a day-to-day experience na consultation as far as data privacy processes are concerned. So even in the advisories of the National Privacy Commission, they're not exactly asking for specific technical requirements because they can be learned. But there's an emerging practice now where companies who look to hiring data privacy professionals somehow require certifications from certification bodies. The National Privacy Commission has its own certification exam. I think it's called the DPOACE program. There is also an international certification body. It's called the IAPP, International Association of Privacy Professionals. They also conduct certification exams. Tapos when you get certified, yun pwedeng maging requirement siya. But in the Philippines, legally speaking, hindi nire-require ng National Privacy Commission for a data protection officer to have a certification. Pero it's encouraged na you take courses on data privacy. Last thing, yung sinabi ni Eric na, is there a legal liability as far as becoming a data privacy or data protection officer is concerned? The answer there is yes and no. The answer is yes if you become negligent on the things that you are supposed to do. Say, for example, the law requires you to register your data processing systems and you don't do that. The law requires you to have certain policies in your company and you didn't draft policies like that. So that means that you are negligent and there's a breach. Ang reason ng breach na yun is because there is no proper policy inside the organization. Then, it's possible na pwede kang mademanda at makulong. But if you're doing this na may due diligence ka at you are implementing all the processes necessary to secure data, I don't see any reason kung bakit ka magkakaroon ng criminal liability.
Interesting you have mentioned. First, parang nakikita ko, for you to be a data protection officer or professional, at least you are a senior in your organization. Or if you have a background from other organization, that would be good. Pero let's talk about ethics here because you know the law. And of course, you are also, you have concerns or interests about the organization you're in or company, but the ethics involved, how do you marry that in this profession?
Okay.
Conflict of interest and making sure that, kasi we have AIs right now, di ba? That is actually the fear of the public will be about all algorithm and all, pero how do you marry the ethics?
If the question is, ano ba yung corporate ethics vis-a-vis data privacy? I think this is a very important piece of segment in this discussion. No? So for example, a company, a telco for example, it has an interest to always market its products to potential clients, for example. In general, yung processes inside the company looks at profit. How do you become more and more profitable? If you remember the Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook before, and I'd like to
goodbye APIs
to use that as an example to describe what's happening. What happened there was an app na plug in siya sa Facebook, and that app mines data, and yung data na yon is yung profile mo, addresses, etc. all public data, and then it shares that into another company. I don't know if it's for a fee. So what happened there was, hindi masyadong clear sa subscribers ni Facebook nung time na yon kung ano yung reason why the data was being collected and who it is given to. Ethically speaking, kung wala pang data privacy regime, there are a variety of reasons why you collect personal information and share it to subsidiaries to grow their business also, di ba? Wala namang ethical question as far as that is concerned because these are your subsidiaries, for example, and it is in creating a list of potential customers is an acceptable process. In fact, sharing leads, for example, from one business unit to another is ethically acceptable in the past. Okay. Right? Now, there are additional guidelines as far as sharing is concerned. Hindi siya ganun kadali ngayon, no? So, even if an organization has a sister company, pero different juridical entity sila, they cannot easily share the leads or the list of clients to another company.
So what you're saying, Abel, is like, for instance, you get like applicants' information under the human resource department.
Yes.
And then suddenly the marketing department wants to conduct surveys
Yeah.
using that information. So are you saying na it's not allowed under this data privacy law?
That's correct, no? Because as babalikan natin yung first principle natin, ano? The basic principle of data privacy is about giving the power back to the data subject or the owner of the data.
Okay.
When the HR collected yung information mo when you were applying, the purpose for collecting it is for the HR team to process your application. And to the mind of the applicant, the reason why his data is being collected or her data is being collected is to process the application. Now, if you send that to the marketing team for purposes of promos or marketing materials, that is not a purpose that the applicant agreed to. So in that regard, you're already violating his or her data privacy rights kasi hindi niya pinayagan yun eh. I didn't consent to that type of processing and now you're
Just
doing
applying.
it. Diba? I was just applying. It's the same thing na when you receive text messages from loan sharks, for example, you didn't consent to that and yet you receive the information. It's not only irritating, it also creates a little bit of paranoia. Who else has access to my data? Who else has access to my phone number? Who are these people calling me? Creates a lot of paranoia on the individual to think na companies collect certain information from you. Like for example, your company collects your SSS numbers, your pag-ibig numbers, etc. If there is no data privacy law in place, there is no other clear hindrance or regulation that regulates sharing of that information to other parties other than corporate culture if they really prioritize the privacy of the individual. But without clear corporate culture that vary from one company to another, wala talagang klarong regulation as far as sharing and processing data is concerned. That is why it's very important that we understand the data privacy regime now. Ito yung fundamental law that regulates processing of personal information.
Before we go to a quick break, as far as I know, under the DPA, most companies are required to have their own data privacy or protection officer, right?
Yes. Yes.
Would this also apply for MSMEs or just to big companies?
There are specific regulations, no? Meron, if you look at the Data Privacy Act, may nilalagay sila doon na minimum requirement as far as employee numbers or data processing of customers is concerned. But the best practice is as long as you collect personal information of customers and clients and employees, you really have to have a data protection officer. Yun yung best practice. Kasi I think one of the loopholes in the law right now is that the registration of a data protection officer is connected to the registration of data processing systems. So if you don't have a data processing system naman in your company, so there is no legal requirement for you to register a data protection officer. So if you're not mandated to register a data protection officer, there is no reason to appoint one.
Correct.
Oh, yung owner na.
Yung owner na, di ba? So ngayon, ang best practice talaga niyan is even if you don't have a data processing system, pero you still process data of your customers, appoint a data protection officer.
Might as well start.
Might as well, yes. Might as well.
Yeah.
All right, so you have defined the difference between data privacy and data protection. Now,
Yes.
what is your general observation when it comes to the data privacy culture in the Philippines? Vis-a-vis, you've mentioned, parang you have compared it to EU that they're already matured and we're still on a parang toddler stage ba? Can we consider it?
Parang ganon, yeah. A few things, no, on this topic. Number one, more and more, mas nagiging aware yung customers that they have data privacy rights. There are two reasons for this. Number one is because the government has been actively telling people that they have data privacy rights. I remember going to the cinema and seeing the advertisements of the National Privacy Commission. No? So before the movie starts, there is an advertisement that tells people, oh, don't just share your information to some fly-by-night or website na hindi mo naman kilala talaga. So there is that push for people to actually care about their data privacy. So that's number one. Number two is because there is already a law that forces corporations to provide data privacy notices to all their customers. So nare-reinforce ngayon yung idea that Filipinos now have data privacy rights and could enjoy data privacy protection. There is a push from the government and there is also a push within corporations, not only because government mandates that, but because, and this is primarily the reason why corporations should be data privacy wary. If you experience a data privacy breach, most of the time, if not all the time, this breach is publicized and it affects your reputation. And we all know that if your
Is it
reputation
trust?
is affected, your sales tend to be affected as well. So clearly, the reason why there is now a push for greater data privacy awareness is because it affects the bottom line of corporations as well. And hindi biro yung fines and penalties in the law, no? It ranges from 500,000 pesos to around 6 million pesos depending on the gravity of the violation. So this is no joke. If you're looking at maintaining your bottom line right now in terms of protecting your costs, you have to be really wary in terms of how you handle personal data. In general, nandun yung trend natin ngayon, no? We are still in the infant stage, maybe we can say that. We can also see birth pains as far as companies complying with the law is concerned. But I think collectively, there is already the imagination of all customers, tinatamaan na yung data privacy. So if you look at apps right now, di ba, may data privacy notice before you confirm your names and numbers.
Oh, pero minsan hindi binabasa.
Well, that is one thing also, no? Hindi tayo masyadong mahilig magbasa about all these things. We just agree, no? Because we want to get the service. But more and more, we are educating our customers, and the government is with us in doing that to make sure that everyone is protected also.
I have like a very quick and trivial question. With this conversation that we're having, is there such thing as a useless or insignificant data nowadays? They're saying that datas are the new gold. When you talk about Cambridge Analytica issue, many people are asserting that those particular data, regardless of how minute they are, manage to influence a lot of outcomes.
The first answer I will say, in order for you to determine yung usefulness ng data, is to frame the conversation and see data as an asset. What are assets? Diba? Say for example, if you're a corporation, you have a building, that's an asset. People is also a corporate asset. Think about banks, for example. If they don't have the database of their customers, would they be able to conduct their business? Probably not. The usefulness of data is determined as far as how you determine data as an asset to the company. If your operation revolves around data such as financial institutions, life insurance companies. For example, when you apply for a life insurance policy, they will ask you all these questions about your health. These are data which they will use to determine what types of products they will give to you.
They could offer.
Exactly, right? So whatever information they collect there is an asset that they can use to determine profitability of that corporation. Because if you're old and you have pre-existing ailments, then you might be a risky client. Hindi kami kikita sa'yo, di ba? So to answer that question directly, data is considered the new gold because you frame the discussion as data being the asset of the company.
It is something that the companies or the organizations from the very start, the intention is for us to use it. So
Yes.
as to the question of Eric,
They put in
insignificant
like a
data.
commercial value.
Kasi if you don't put a value dun sa data na
Naghahanap
kinokolekta mo, walang sense yung pagko-collect mo. And a major principle of data privacy is you only collect the data that you need to provide the goods and services that you offer to your client. If you don't need it, don't collect it.
The million-dollar question there, Abel, is what can threat groups actually do with your data?
Depende kung anong kinokollect mo, no? So it ranges from an irritant to a general crime. So let's say irritant. If hackers were able to get a list of phone numbers, for example, they can sell this to loan sharks and the loan sharks can send you text messages.
Offers.
It's irritating. Offers. It's
Personal
irritating, di ba? Di ba? Personal loans. That is irritating. Yun yung pinaka siguro basic na
Level
impact.
1.
Level 1. What is the highest level? Identity theft. Someone could pretend to be you and access your bank account and take away all your money.
I remember this
Because-
one news before. There's this teacher, and
Yes.
then he for the first time, he got his PRC license. He was so
Okay.
excited and was so proud of himself. He posted
Yeah.
the ID on his Facebook, and then 2 months after, he started receiving collection letters scams. Apparently, someone used his personal data to actually loan, like do personal loans on the banks, the shark loans.
So that is a classic example of identity theft. They stole your identity, pretended to be you, got a lot of money out of it, and now you are suffering because of it. That is why it's very, very important that you take care of your data. Second example is just really physical security. If someone is able to access your personal information, imagine the potential physical security impact that could create. If somebody knows what school your daughter or your son goes to, you are vulnerable to people kidnapping your child, for example, because they know what time you get out of the school or the child gets out of the school, what vehicle he rides or she rides, etc. No? All this information, all this data that we are collecting, the corporations that collect them have to be wary who we share this information to, and secondly, educating your employees about how they handle data. Give you an example. Corporation A is a hotel. Corporation A doesn't have rigid data privacy and data protection policies inside the corporation. So, the front desk officer has access to all clients currently checked in the hotel. It happens that there is a VIP there. So bellboy, for example, asks the front office officer, andito pala si VIP person, let's say Boxer. Yes, he's in this number room. And then bellboy goes to his friends after shift, drinks beer with friends, discloses na, you know what? Famous Boxer is already in hotel letter A. So what happens then, di ba? People will now go to that hotel threatening the security of the VIP. So that's one example. There also has to be an understanding of common threats. Maiden name is one, and birthday is one. So hackers will generally socially engineer the situation to get those information. So the data protection officer now should be able to understand that if these are the trends, then maybe validation questions should be revisited. Baka next time, it's not going to be the birth date, di ba? It's another
Name
question.
of your first dog.
Pwede.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because it's always
That's why
the usual question.
Correct. That's why it's very important that the data protection officer understands yung common practices and processes inside the company.
Yeah. Quick facts. In a study conducted by IBM, U.S. organizations face the highest cost with an average of 8.19 million per breach. In the Philippines, do we have similar studies?
Hindi ako familiar na sa any company na na-fine ni National Privacy Commission kasi pinapublicize naman ni National Privacy Commission yan. No? So I think
really?
it's safe to say na wala pang nafa-fine. Ang napapublicize lang is yung mga breaches that these companies experience because it is legally mandated that they report it to the National Privacy Commission. So, there is paranoia right now kung sino ba who will be the first one to be the example. Hopefully not us. Kaya it's very, 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 very important for all corporations now to create a robust data privacy culture within the organization kasi you don't want to be the first one. And it's not nice for your organization to be publicized.
To be part of a case study.
A case study to be the first one to be fined by the National Privacy Commission. And the first one is always the benchmark if you talk about it, diba? So you become the subject of all these studies. Exactly. Nakakahiya siya. And I know na bababa talaga yung bababa. And your competitor will capitalize on that. I mean, there are a lot of things that could happen if you don't take care of these things.
Let's talk about data privacy in this time of pandemic. Before we started our program, I asked you, are you busier this time? And what are your observations with the data privacy time of pandemic?
Two things, no? The first one is, are data privacy professionals more busy? The answer is yes. And it's not surprising in the time of the pandemic because mas maraming online activities now. It means there are a little bit more data that we are collecting. That's number one. Number two, since we are already working from home, we have a little bit more free time to go online and learn about our data privacy rights. We see a significant increase of inquiries about data privacy. Significant increase yan, before and after the pandemic. So people are more worried about their data right now. So if you don't have a data privacy structure in your company, this is the right time to actually have one kasi sobrang daming dumarating na inquiries and complaints about their data privacy rights right now. The second thing I want to say is in terms of the pandemic na, I think the first question that you want to ask is it okay for business establishments to get your personal information for contact tracing? I think that is the general question right now.
Yeah.
The answer there is yes. Because in the law, there is consent is one of the bases for processing your personal information. I've already discussed that. But there is another reason to collect personal information, and that is if there is a legal requirement by the national government to process that information. And clearly, the Department of Health is mandated to protect us from the pandemic, and one of the ways to protect us is to contact trace. Minamandate ngayon ng Department of Health yung corporations to collect this information so that later on we can use it to trace individuals who might be exposed, no? So even if you're not consenting, you will say na, no, I don't want to provide my data, my number, and my health information to, I don't know, an establishment. Unfortunately, you have to do that if you want to enter the establishment because there is a regulation from the Department of Health for the establishment to do that. Walang takas kung sinabi.
There's well, I'm going to ask this question simply because there's a grumpy person who finds this particular contact tracing processes too redundant. Like for instance, there are malls or commercial establishments wherein they would ask you to sign a contact form once you enter the mall, and then there's another contact tracing form for each of the establishments that you're going to enter. The benefit of our audience is such redundancy necessary?
The answer there is that it's not redundant. So you have to ask the question again. I always come back to the first principle. There has to be a purpose for doing this thing. The reason why stalls in different parts of the mall collect your information is because it has to do something about the distances of people from one another. If you look at Mega Mall, which is a huge mall, you cannot really come up with reliable set of data if you only have one point of entry and determine kung sino yung potential PUI or PUM based on that. Why? Because the mall is huge and it will be nonsensical if the basis of contact tracing will be the entrance because thousands and thousands of people will enter that environment. The more logical thing to do is determine if you entered a particular stall or establishment because that is a more confined space. Meaning, the potentiality of infecting someone else is higher in a smaller confined space vis-a-vis the entire mall. That is why it's not redundant because the purpose of contact tracing is in terms of how many people potentially yung lumapit sa'yo. And if they are in the same establishment, there is potentiality na nagkaroon sila ng contact sa'yo versus all the other people who went inside the mall, you included. So it's going to be a contact tracing nightmare kung yung basis is yung entrance ng mall lang versus if you use the establishment, those are fewer people and it's easier and more efficient to contact trace. So again, it's not redundant.
Going back dun sa issue of when it comes to data privacy and the pandemic, the current reality now is that, as you mentioned a while ago, there are a lot of employees working remotely. So when it comes to supervision, regardless of how robust your data privacy policies are, or even your data protection, how as an employer or how as a business owner would you make sure or would you safeguard that your data are actually protected?
Very good question. Fun fact before I answer the question, one of the highest contributors to breaches is employee negligence. How do you protect yourself? The first thing is you have to create a policy that punishes bad practices as far as data is concerned. In my organization, you only access data that is relevant to your work. It's role-based access, meaning people who don't have anything to do with customer information should not have access to that data.
How do you detect?
Yun nga. So there has to be there has to be some form of technology that logs access to data, especially when this is digital access. No, access management systems, I think, would be one. So the systems right now that are being developed, when you enter the system, you have to input your credentials. So there has to be a logging system kung sino yung nag-input ng credentials. More than that, there has to be a logging system as far as the user accessing certain amount of information is concerned. So if you're a call center, for example, your system as a call center company, for example, should be able to log kung sinong agents yung nag-access ng personal information ng certain customers. Why is this important? Because in cases of breach or complaint, that is where your forensics, data privacy forensics will go to. Which individuals had access to this client at a particular time. So that's number one. Madali investigation. So one is processes and policies you have to implement in the organization. Number two is that data privacy enhancing technologies, you have to have them in your corporation. Number three is that there has to be serious repercussions for violating privacy rights. So in our company, for example, if you access data which you're not supposed to access, especially when that is customer data, you can be terminated up to that extent. That is on top of the potential criminal liability that you will encounter should the company feel that it has to file cases against you. If the company wants to protect its personal information against bad employees, these controls have to be in place. And more than that, the National Privacy Commission will look for these controls to check if you have been negligent. Kasi the National Privacy Commission naman is not there to like get money out of corporations. Ang goal ni National Privacy Commission is to make sure that no company is negligent. And negligence is determined by the ability of the corporation to determine ano ba yung risks na nag-exist. And am I going to do something about it? And I think Eric is Eric, no, we are very familiar about security risks, no? If you determine vulnerabilities, kailangan mong sagutin yung gap na yon. Ano bang ginagawa ng corporation to address the security gap or security vulnerability? If you know that the vulnerability exists and you didn't do anything about it, the National Privacy Commission will say, oh, alam mo na merong vulnerability, you didn't do anything about it. That means you're negligent. That's the time na pwede kang makasuhan. Kasi pag nanakaw yung data mo because there is a hacker out there na sobrang galing, with all the security controls that you put in place, nanakaw pa rin, hindi ka naman kakasuhan ni National Privacy Commission eh. Kasi National Privacy Commission would not be able to control all these hackers all over the world, di ba? It's humanly impossible to do that. What is important is you are being diligent and you don't resort to negligence as far as your data is concerned.
You're being proactive.
Let's say an employee was the source of a breach, but she acted in good faith. But without the intent, she proved that there were really no intentions to do something bad. But for some reason, the data was breached, the data leaked. Would that employee be liable still? So
again, question yan ng question yan ng negligence, no? For example, if for example the company already says, oh, you shouldn't store customer information in the USB, and this employee, because he wants to finish his daily tasks, says na, okay, I'll bring my work inside to my house na lang kasi I want to finish I want to beat all my deadline, diba? While the intention there is nice, the person is still negligent because he knows that he shouldn't do that. In that case, that person could be liable. There is clear regulation to say you shouldn't do that. Number two, insofar as National Privacy Commission is concerned, meron bang policy si corporation to control or educate the individual to make them aware? Kasi it's possible, and this is another tidbit that you might want to take into consideration. It's possible that you have all these policies and controls in place, but you don't have a privacy awareness culture. I mean, it's there, but you don't tell the employees how it works, or the employees, they're not aware about privacy. So they will still be able to commit these acts because they don't know. So that becomes now the problem of the organization. You also have to show there is adequate awareness campaign and education campaign within the organization to actually inform the employees, kasi that is exactly the point of having this in place. And if nobody gets to practice them, there's no point. I mean, so
oh boy, that would be very problematic.
True.
Thank you so much, Abel, as we select your questions. Tonight's episode is brought to you by
Business Profiles Incorporated, leading the way to strategic corporate risk and security management solutions. Business Profiles Incorporated, our business is to keep you in business. Black Pearl Consultancy, bringing intelligence analysis, travel security, and business continuity support to new heights. Black Pearl Consultancy, intelligence for smarter decisions.
BP Argus Security Services Incorporated. For holistic industrial protection, BP Argus Security Services is committed to the highest standards of providing effective security manpower services. Blue Force Security Services, the security manpower of choice by many companies and organizations in the Philippines. Blue Force Security Services, delivering quality protection and service integrity to your corporate needs. Casting live from Manila, Philippines, we are Simply Security, helping you streamline security easily.
So now we're going to read some of our participants' comments as well as questions. I'm not sure whether or not this was answered a while ago. I think nasagot na. Is there some truth about some networks or institutions that supposedly sell their patrons' mobile numbers to other institutions?
There might be for companies who are negligent, but for established companies, this is a definite no-no. So alam din nila yan.
Now, this is a combined question from Ramil, Maravillon, and Veronica. Data privacy appears to not be respected in some commercial establishments, with all contact tracing forms collected in an open box that is seen by everyone and or anyone. Isn't there a guideline created by the Philippine government on how to secure the completed forms to ensure privacy is respected? And in relation to the question, can a person be allowed to invoke the DPA and refuse to fill up the form and still allow or insist entry or gain access to, wow, this is a very beautiful question, to certain establishments?
I agree with you. There are companies that do not really take care of the data that they collect. So that means they're negligent. That's number one. And you don't want to be that company. So don't do that. Don't just allow these forms to stay there without anyone taking care of them. Don't do that. If there is there a regulation as far as taking care of the data is concerned? The Data Privacy Act already mandates corporations to take care of the data. Specifically, if this is a physical form that contains personal information of customers, this has to be kept in vaults or in places where there is adequate physical security. Ando na yan sa batas, no? The answer is yes. Maybe what you can do to complain to the National Privacy Commission is take pictures of the forms na nakakalat and then send them an email para the National Privacy Commission can run after these restaurants or whatever business establishment. The next question is, can you say no to this? Unfortunately, consent is not the basis for processing this information. The basis is a government regulatory instruction from the Department of Health. So hindi pwede na tumanggi ka dito. Kung gusto mo pumasok to the establishment, you have to undertake the collection. Otherwise, wag kang pumasok.
I have an insight from Mr. Hermy Colina. Companies should do an inventory of personal information collected over the years to ensure that appropriate controls are in place as mandated by law. He also said that whilst the EU privacy regime is already mature and they have passed the GDPR, our Data Privacy Act is much more tougher given the jail time penalties.
I clearly agree, no? The GDPR, the European regime, does not have a penal clause. It is in the Philippines that one, if negligent, can go to jail. That is why we have to be a little bit more wary about it. I don't know if it's awareness that is problematic, no? To communicate the repercussions, or bata pa talaga tayo, nasa infant stage pa lang tayo. But again, as I already said, no, there is already a surge of awareness. But as you can already see, obviously, restaurants have these forms nakakalat there. So I really don't understand these things, why they're happening there. Minsan, I just want to rant to the manager, but what can they do? If they don't have a data privacy culture inside their organization, and these are bits and pieces of that. If you clearly see these forms outside, you can very well bet on it. They don't have a robust data privacy culture in that company.
Just a curious question, Abel. How much jail time are we talking about when it comes to DP violation?
6 months to 6 years, depending on how much you want to be negligent
So
about
the
it.
gravity of your negligence.
Yeah, diba? I mean,
That's a lot, huh?
that's a
So
lot of
question
time to
from
spend in jail.
yeah,
Yeah.
question from Ed Velasco. For CCTV usage, is there any limitations and or prohibition as to authority or usage of footage?
Definitely, no. When you collect a video is an identifier, or a picture is an identifier of the individual. So a video and a picture, these are all considered personal information. So protected siya under the data privacy regime. What we normally tell people who ask us about CCTVs is that, one, there has to be notice that they are being taped. You notice a company before you enter na you have to tell them that there is CCTV. Secondly, it has to be clear why the CCTV is there. So clearly, ang ano naman yan, security purpose. So that's clear also.
Okay.
Can the
But what
company
if-
share the video to anyone? The answer there is no.
Yes.
Because even if the company has the right to take your video, the company does not have the right to share this to any individual. There are only very specific reasons to
enforcers?
share. Law enforcers, for example, and even in the case nga of the law enforcement agency, if they don't have a subpoena, you can share it to them.
Yeah, or a court order.
Yeah, I was
Like
about
Court
to ask
order.
that.
There has to be.
Another question from Mr. Seferino Jimenez. The loophole in data privacy is only on personal data, those that are collected from clients. How about business-to-business data wherein there are no personal identification of those data, just like general information?
In all the data privacy regimes, I think globally speaking, they define personal information as the subject matter. And it's important that is defined. We are talking about human rights to privacy.
Yeah.
If you talk about corporate information, or maybe to an extent corporate espionage, hindi niya covered yun, no? Because that is a corporate matter. So corporations should be able to protect trade secrets, etc., on their own because it's important to them. What the government is trying to protect us from is because it is also found in our constitution, no? The individual should feel safe in his person, in his house, in his papers, in his communication, etc. So all this information that determine who we are, no, is part of our privacy rights right now, and the government has a duty to protect that.
Now, last question from our listeners. Online businesses are up and data are collected by online marketers. How can we be sure that we are guarded against breach when in fact we divulge our addresses and online sellers even demand picture of the receiver of the parcel?
Ang question is, how do we demand accountability siguro, no? First thing I want to say is don't share your information if you don't trust the company. So if you feel that there is like for example, you receive a text message that there is a link, tapos the link collects your personal information and you don't trust that company, don't give it away. That's number one. But for example, you're talking about online companies like I don't know, Grab, for example, or Airbnb, for example, Foodpanda, for example. I would suppose because these are very large companies, they already have a data privacy structure inside them. You can definitely call their customer hotline if you feel that your data privacy rights have been stepped upon. So for example, if it's a parcel company that delivers your parcel and takes a picture of you receiving that information, no? And of course, they will have access to your phone number. And there were instances na the driver or the rider texts you out of the blue because maybe they like you because you're pretty or handsome, for example. What you can do is complain to the company that that person is doing that because that is a violation of your data privacy right. The reason why your data was collected is for the parcel to be delivered. If the rider uses the data or your phone number to chat you or do small talk with you, that is not within the reasons why the data was collected and you have reason to complain to the company. If the company doesn't respond to you, make a narrative of what happened to you and send that as a complaint to the National Privacy Commission. So that is the next step, no? You can complain the company, and the company as their riders, for example, or any employee for that matter, again, should have to follow data privacy policies. And one of them is not to contact the customer for chit-chat or to be friends with them.
Personal.
Parting
Alright.
question. I think this will be our last question for tonight. How do you think we can further promote data privacy? Like specific strategies, not only in our individual companies, but also in the Philippines.
First one is sa company-wide, no, not to think as data privacy is merely compliance. Data privacy is all about customer experience. And if you want to take care
And
of
customer
your
security.
Yes, if you want to agree, customer security. If you want repeat customers, if you want to maintain customer trust, then those are the fundamental reasons why you want to engage with data privacy. So if it's the purpose of your company to take care of your customers, then have active campaigns to your customers, inform them about how you take care of their data and how these policies form part of their data privacy rights and how you want to take care of their data privacy. Why is this important? Other than it builds customer trust, it also differentiates you from your competitor.
Yeah.
If your competitor is not willing to take care of the data, then it is more likely that your or potential customers out there can use data privacy as one of the reasons why they would choose you. That's number one. Number two is there is already increasing awareness in terms of corporate clients are concerned. Give you an example. For example, we want to go out on a company outing, and pupunta kami sa isang resort. Before we share employee data to the resort, we want to make sure that the resort has ample data privacy structures. We have
Part of the
VIP, due diligence, no? We have VIPs inside our company. So not only does it make sense that you want to get customer trust, it's also that corporate clients are wary of their personal information. So that's an additional reason why you want to take care of personal data.
Is this part of the accreditation?
Sometimes it is. In my organization, there is an incredibly rigid process to be accredited. We would like to make sure that before you receive our information, you have everything, as in the 32-point guideline ng National Privacy Commission. We will make sure that we have agreements, di ba? Contracts in place before we share anything to you.
And also, I would like to add to what Abel is saying earlier. A company organization should also teach their customers on how to protect their data. Parang there's some mutual accountability so that it's, I think, the job of the organization or at least an extra mile if they will do that. Now we go to the quick talk.
Quick talk. This is simple. We'll be just basically give you two options and you just have to choose one. Okay, so you cannot say it depends. You cannot refuse to answer. No explanation needed. All right, so are you ready?
Sure, I'm ready.
Okay, city life or provincial life?
City life.
Working remotely or working on the office?
Office.
iOS or Android?
Once you go back, you don't come back.
Okay.
Suits or Big Bang Theory?
Big Bang, Big Bang.
Consultations or trainings?
Consultation.
Data privacy or data protection?
Data privacy.
Beer or hard drinks?
Here.
UP Baguio or UP Diliman?
It's easy to fall in love with UP Baguio.
Thank you
Alright.
very much, Abel. And of course, thank you to everyone who tuned in and participated. We would like to have Abel next time for part 2 on data privacy. There are some people who are requesting that we will have you to talk more about data privacy because it's new. There are a lot of things to talk about. We hope that you will agree again next time.
Of course.
I'm about to say if we could ask Abel's consent in giving his email address for those people who want to reach him out. Probably you could just ask us na lang directly.
Yes. And I give you the consent, Eric, right now. So if you have questions, you want to discuss more about this, then fine.
For everyone, we hope that you enjoyed and learned something from tonight's episode. We also wish to have you again next time. We are casting live every Wednesday, 6:30 in the evening. Also available now in Apple Podcasts. So to get the latest security information in the Philippines and for our upcoming events, do not forget to follow us on LinkedIn at Black Pearl Consultancy under Information Services and via Twitter via blackpearl_INC.
Again, this is Miles.
And this is Eric.
This has been Simply Security,
helping you streamline security easily.